Hey, Facebook friends, it's Marianne here, and I wanted to begin this year off with doing a video to talk to you guys about a reality that many people are facing, and that is dealing with the challenge of juggling whether they pay their mortgage, rent, or their health care, or for food. Now, we talk a lot of times about homeless people, and we think of them as somebody who is living out there on the street. But there's a great demographic in our nation that people aren't seeing. And these are people that you have a couple and they're each working 2 jobs. They may have 3 kids to feed, and they're putting so much effort into staying just above the water. And these people work hard. They work incredibly hard. And many times, despite working a 9-to-5 job, in many cases, they work the equivalent of 2 9-to-5 jobs. Somehow they squeeze all those hours in just in order to make ends meet. And I don't know if some of you have been hearing the statistics, but right now, if a millennial was to go out there and try and launch their family and life the way people did back in the 60s or 70s, the cost for them to be able to do that is almost 6 times what it took for a baby boomer to go out there and do that when they were in their 20s and 30s. So, we really need to take a pause and look at this. Right now in our country, we have a lot of elders who are struggling very hard to pay their health care bills, and they can't afford to do that because they're having to make choices. Do they put food on their tables? Do they pay that mortgage and rent? Or do they put food in their bellies? Right now, when we work with Food Source DFW, which is one of the leading initiatives in our nation fighting food waste, and right now our program is working with so many different groups, including FEMA, including the Stew Pot, including many other groups that you guys have heard about here in North Texas, and it's serving people all the way, to Houston. It's helped people at Puerto Rico. It's helped many other places, Waco, Fort Worth, you name it, Gun Barrel. Anyway, point is, what we find a lot of times is there are people who do have a home, who are paying their taxes, who are educated. Many times these people have a master's degree even, and things are very difficult. And the only way that they don't have to choose between whether or not to pay for health care versus rent or mortgage versus food is if somebody comes in and helps with that food. Now, there are things we could do right now in our country. We could raise the minimum wage. We could cap things such as life-saving drugs, those who, are absolutely badly needing something in order to, fight being diabetic or fight other kinds of illnesses. They're being gouged because that kind of medicine, it's being sold 6 times the production cost. Whereas you have states like Colorado and you have countries such as places like Rwanda where they say if it's a life-saving drug, guess what? It can't be retailed for more than 3 times the value of production. And guess what? The company still gets to make millions of dollars in profit. And yet people are not being gouged and basically sentenced to die because they can't pay for their medication. And yet, in our country, we have people that are on the cocktail trying to deal with HIV. We have people who are not able to buy what they need in order to fight their diabetes. We have people that need, desperately need to be able to have an EpiPen, and they can't afford that EpiPen that could save their life because some idiot opens a package of peanuts next to them. These are realities that people are seeing every single day, and they can't afford that medicine because guess what? They're having to pay in order to get the food. And now we have situations in our country where we have things on the border, such as that butterfly center, and people want to just get rid of it, and they're not looking at connecting the dots. If you don't have that butterfly center, guess what that means? Eventually, you're going to have people going out there and hand pollinating crops. And you know what? That means groceries are going to go up. Point is that we're not looking at these things from a holistic perspective. But if we were to take the time and we realize, let's break it down. What is the average American dealing with? And why are we having so many people who actually are educated, highly educated in many cases, both parents working their asses off, people trying so hard to juggle multiple jobs, in many cases the teenager in the family is also contributing, and yet they're still struggling to the point that they have to rely on being able to find programs like Food Source DFW to get them the food they need. And we have homeless shelters and we have food pantries that are coming to places like Food Source DFW saying we need even more. And yet, right now, we have this whole I'm not going to say that deals with 100% because yes, I know there are people on drugs. I know there are people that made poor choices, but in the reality, a lot of the people on food stamps are living their lives the right way. They've made the right decisions, but something somewhere has hurt them. Perhaps someone had a fall at work. Sometimes they're unforeseen circumstances. In my own organization, we have an incredible employee who has been dealing with trying to get his little baby son a liver. These things are expensive, and we end up demonizing as a society the people that are struggling so hard that they need that extra help in order to make ends meet. And that's where the food stamps come in. So instead of just saying everybody who's on food stamps are not working and we're omitting the dignity of work, that's a lie. Many of these people know the dignity of work. Many of these people want to work. They just can't find it. And within the last month or so, I've heard so many people who've done so many good things for our community, but something's come through. Someone didn't pay like they were supposed to. Someone had an illness. Someone had a fall. So people run into these situations all the time. And these are hard-working, contributing members of our society. As those of us who are blessed to not be in that situation, we need to have the humility to realize that we are often just one major illness, one major catastrophe from being exactly where they are. And many times those who don't end up on the street are because someone else somewhere, maybe they had an inheritance. Maybe like me, there's a trust. Maybe. But that's actually rare. Many of these people who are on the street, I saw a sign recently, a photograph of a homeless man, and he said, "I used to be just like you." And we need to recognize that, but for the grace of God, go I. Every single one of us gets to eat and have a roof over our heads for the grace of God. Maybe we made all the right decisions, but that doesn't mean that the next person that you pass on the street didn't make all the right decisions too. And unfortunately, life treats them in an unfair way. Who are we to judge that? And why are we to say that they don't know the dignity of work? And I find that to be appalling. I find that to be disrespectful, especially when we have situations such as one of the number one demographics finding themselves on the street are teachers. A lot of times when they get to be a certain age, our public schools fire them. And yet they're highly educated. They've done incredible work as teachers, but they just get fired because they're a certain age. And yet you have somebody out there on the street who has done everything right, but teachers don't get a lot of salary that they can save up. They did it out of passion. And if they did have extra money, many a time they were going out there and buying the materials that the students' own families couldn't. Or I have a cousin of mine that was telling me, and he's a wonderful teacher, that if a student can't pay for food, he uses his salary to pay for their meals at school. This is the situation that we're in right now in our country. So before we start demonizing those of us who are low on our luck, let's really think about that before we assume they don't know the dignity of work. And the thing that really set me off on this is not just that I've been seeing this attitude on social media, but I'm going to share with you this video that I just find appalling. I'm not going to play the whole thing, don't worry. But this is something that I just, quite frankly, I cannot believe that I'm hearing. Now, if you are and from an Abrahamic faith, you understand that we're supposed to be caring about people. And if you're from a Christian faith, you understand that we're supposed to especially care for the poor and needy and for the homeless and for those dealing with health issues. That is something that has always been in every single Christian church since infinity. Unfortunately, right now, there's a whole idea that is trying to say that it's the poor in spirit. And by doing that, it removes responsibility away from those of us who are blessed to caring for those who are not in a privileged situation and providing them the dignity that they require in order to survive. Instead, it helps legitimize it. It's kind of a very warped, almost karma-esque view of the world that if you are in a good place, it's because you deserve to be. And I call bullshit on that because I'm very blessed, and through no hard work of my own, it was my father's hard work. It was all the hard work of his employees, their blood, sweat, and tears, that I get to pay my bills. And I didn't earn that. And I will openly say that as a one percenter, I did not earn that privilege. And if I can see that, then surely a lot of other people need to see that we are all where we are because of a lot of people contributing. So who are we to think that we are somehow innately more deserving simply because we find ourselves to be in a privileged position? Instead, when you're in a privileged position, you should be feeling responsibility for those who are not. So I'm going to try and turn this around so you can see this and hear this. Listen.
6 million have been moved from food stamps to the dignity of work.
That right there are church leaders praising Trump for moving 6 million people off of food stamps to the dignity of work. And what they're referring to is not that 6 million people got jobs that were able to help them pay for their food. No, it just meant denying 6 million people food stamps. These are the food stamps that you have families relying on in order to be able to put food on their families and be able to afford a roof over their head and the medicine that they require to get ahead. This should be appalling to all of us. This should not be something that spiritual leaders are praising. This should be something that spiritual leaders are saying, this is horrendous. Where is the dignity of spirit that allows you to have the compassion and sense of responsibility to care for the least among us, those who are struggling? That is the question that we as a nation should be asking ourselves. So I'm appalled by this, and I hope you are too, and especially the attitude that we're seeing going around on social media, that somehow if you're on food stamps, you're sucking away things. And I know for those of you that buy into the whole brown people are taking over America, racist stuff, well, here's a little thing for those of you that really base it all on race. Guess what? The number one demographic on food stamps in our nation happens to be white. It's not the brown people. So you can get off of that too. So if you start looking at all these statistics and we can get past the racial stuff and we can just look at the fact that you have really hard-working, struggling families, and many of them don't want to be on food stamps the rest of their life. I've met some of these people. They want to be able to be given the opportunity to get off of it, and they just need that crutch for a little while. And if we want to get them off of it, again, I'm going to repeat two things: raising the minimum wage, so that they, and actually in an ideal world, we just make the minimum wage forever in ratio to what, to inflation. That would make the most sense, wouldn't it? But no one ever talks about that. The other thing that we need to do as a nation is to cap off life-saving drugs so that they can no longer be sold for more than 3 times the value of production. If we just did those two things, guess what? The number of people needing food stamps would go down. So I just want to toss that out there and say it's all incumbent upon all of us to care and recognize about the individual humanity of people. And if you are like me in a privileged position where you know where your next meal is going to come from, then guess what? Like it or not, it's our responsibility to make sure those who are facing a hard moment in life with their backs against the wall are able to eat something. And even if you can't do it for thousands of people, do it for one. Do whatever you can for at least one person to help them keep that roof over their head and food on their table. Because yes, every single one of us is just one illness, one catastrophe away from being where they are. And we need to have the humility to see that. Thank you.